Hello, everyone. It's Meg Bouvier, and welcome to another week of Ask the Grant Writing Expert. You know me as the person who created the course library that your organization has access to or that you yourself have purchased access to. I am a neuroscientist turned NIH staff writer turned NIH full-time NIH grant writer. So I am here to answer your questions live. I'm coming to you from Western Massachusetts today, where it went from 98 degrees yesterday to 58 degrees today. And if you hear noise in the background, apparently they're doing a lot of yard work around here. So hopefully you're not getting inundated with noise. So for those of you who are new to the call, you are in listen only mode. So if you look on your toolbar, you'll see that there is a place where you can ask questions. So if any of you have questions that you'd like me to answer live, feel free to type them into the Q&A box. And there is also a chat box. So if there's something that we're discussing and you have something to add to the conversation, feel free to do that. So I do have some questions that people sent me ahead of time, and I have a number of topics that I want to cover as well. So I think I'm going to start by answering a couple of questions that people had sent me. One question I got was, is there a required way to format references? And the answer to that is no. SF 424 is silent on the issue of how to format references. So you can do them however you like. And the way you cite them, you can do that however you like as well. So some people, a lot of people like the author's comma year citation. It's not my preference because it takes up so much space, and your space is always at a premium on an NIH grant application. So my strong preference is numbered references. Numbered superscripts are even better because they take up the least amount of space possible. And the way that you actually format your reference list is you can do it however you want. Related to that, a question I had was, do you need references on the AIMS page? And the answer is no. There's nothing that says that you have to use references on the AIMS page. Some grantees include them, some do not. It's really up to you. When in doubt, I usually recommend that a person start by not putting references in, because a one-page specific AIMS document, space is at such a premium, and it's so important to get the appropriate details into that page that I'm always kind of reluctant to have people add references. And in my anecdotal experience, I probably look at somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 applications a year across all topic areas and study sections. And I would say most people don't include them on the AIMS page, but some do, and it's fine to do that. Plenty of successful grantees do that. Another question had kind of a long question about how to handle acronyms when you have a project that has a lot of acronyms. And so there are a couple of ways to do that. This year I saw a strategy that I thought was very nice, where a person had a specific AIMS page, and they defined a lot of the acronyms on the specific AIMS page because you needed to have them in front of you as you read the specific AIMS, because the acronyms were used extensively throughout the AIMS page itself. And in that instance, what they did was on first use, they would write the word out and then parenthetically put the acronym. And then the acronym itself, they'd put in colored font. My preference is always like a medium blue, medium to dark blue, with enough contrast to see that it's not black. So when you looked at the AIMS page, there were acronyms around the AIMS page that were in this medium blue font. So as you were reading, you could glance back and refer back to where it was defined very easily because the font was colored. Another strategy that I often have people use on the research strategy itself is to create a little text box in the upper right corner of this, where the significance is. So the very beginning of the research strategy. And within that, to almost just have a legend where you don't even have to call it a table or a figure or anything, just a text box where you have the acronym in bold and then spelled out in text to the right of it. And of course, you can go down to 9-point font if you do that. I, as a reviewer, find that very easy to refer back to as I'm reading through an application. If there's anything I don't understand, I can easily flip back and look at that. Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to review today, because people are kind of coming into the tail end of their writing. People who are doing R01s are probably done with their writing by now. And people who are doing R21s, R03, that kind of thing their deadlines are coming up quickly. And then of course, July is the resubmission deadline. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Bear with me for a sec. Okay, so here is a list of the courses that you guys all have access to through your course library. So you've probably been working extensively with your appropriate writing course, whether it's Master the R or Master the K. I would say at this point, you probably want to shift gears and look at checklists to avoid top mistakes. And if you are doing a resubmission of any kind, you probably want to look at the writing course Master Resubmissions. So probably a fair number of you are doing resubmissions for the July deadlines. So for those who are getting ready to submit, I just want to say a few words about resubmissions and what happens after you upload. So let's pull this on here. So this is a little graphic that I created. It's in several of my writing courses, including the Master the R series. So, and I'm just going to pause because it looks like okay, I thought there was a question. Okay, so a lot of people ask me what happens after I upload, when can I expect to hear, and what is the path of review? So just very quickly to walk you through this. After you upload to the grants.gov portal, you'll be assigned to a study section. Hopefully you filled out your 2-page assignment request form and you did all the legwork that I discuss in the preparation portions of the writing course, where you do the CSR ART tool and pick your study section and then search that study section in Reporter to see what they funded. And you've come up with 1 or 2 possibilities. You put them in an assignment request form, and hopefully CSR will offer you one of those. But they will assign you to a specific study section. And the SRO, the scientific review officer who runs the study section, receives the applications, and then they assign it to reviewers, primary, secondary, tertiary reviewer. Those folks will read it ahead of time before the study section meeting, and they'll upload their scores. After they upload their scores, there's a window of time where they can look at what the other reviewers stated, and they have the opportunity to amend their score based on what the other reviewers are saying. So while there's not an actual dialogue between the assigned reviewers, they do have the opportunity to look at the comments of the other people and change their comments accordingly. So based on that review, the bottom half, that's where their journey ends. They're called triaged or not discussed, and they're not funded, and that's that. The top half will go on to be discussed at the live study section meeting where the entire panel of reviewers meets. So what happens there is that typically the primary reviewer leads a discussion of the application, and you know, the other reviewers are glancing through the application as it's being discussed, but the only ones who have read it really ahead of time are the 3 assigned reviewers. The other ones are kind of skimming and glancing at it and asking questions, and there's a lively discussion going on. And then the entire panel votes. They have an equally weighted vote. And then that score The ones who are well below the funding line, so let's say the funding line is at like 7 or 8%. If you're like at 20 to 25%, that's where your journey ends and you're not funded. The ones who are below or near the funding line will move on to the second level review, which occurs at the advisory council for the institute. So 3 times a year, an advisory panel made up of scientists and community members and, you know, legislative types and lawyers and all different types of people. They come together to advise the institute director on all business related to running the institute. And it could be anything, communications, budgeting, all kinds, staffing issues, it's all kinds of stuff. Some of that meeting is open to the public, some of it is obviously closed. And one of the most important things that happens at the closed portion is a discussion of possible applications for funding. And that's where the funding decision is actually made. So council members will discuss it. Usually the program officer is the one presenting the application at that point. And, you know, the ones that are near the funding line, there are usually a lot of them that cluster near the funding line. And the council members will hand pick which ones they want to fund from around the funding line, usually based on how closely aligned it is with the funding priorities of the institute at that time. So what happens there is that the funding decision is made and it's either not funded or there's a notice of award. So just so you know, one question I often get asked, if I got a just-in-time request, does that mean I'm funded? And the answer is no. They send a just-in-time request to, you know, like the top 20% of applicants, but they may only fund like say 7 or 8%. So the just-in-time request is just to make sure that council members have a lot of latitude in hand-picking the ones that are of most interest to them. All right, so that's how that journey occurs. And so then I wanted to look at some summary statements with you. Let me just see where I put those. Okay, so I picked one of these. So this is another, NIAID has quite a few sample applications. They just uploaded some from Forms E. So remember, we're in Forms G now. So this is 2 form sets ago. So some aspects of it are a little bit outdated, but these are still very useful. So looking at this first one by Dr. McLeod here. So here is the summary statement. So I just want to give you guys a sense of how to read a summary statement as you prepare to upload your application. So this is what the cover page looks like. It's anonymized. This has contact information for the program officer. Then this is the application number, the PI's name, the applicant organization where they're coming from, which review group it went to, when that group met, when the council met, the requested start date, which RFA or PA it was assigned to, the title is here, and then this is where you're going to really want to look. This is like where the score is. So if it's triaged, you'll see a series of plus signs. That means that it's not scored. It wasn't discussed at the full panel and it's not going to be funded. So often there is an actual score and a percentile score. So in this case, it's they just gave the actual score. And then the budgeting information is here. This is not part of the summary statement. This is part of the sample. It's just reminding you that these samples, you know, are somewhat outdated and that you just need to keep on top of current scoring criteria. So the next page, you'll see the summary of discussion. So I believe this is written by the primary reviewer, if I'm not mistaken. And it's their take on what the summary of the discussion is, which may or may not be consistent with what other people think the summary of the discussion was. So this is one of the reasons I always have grantees talk to their program officer, because it's not uncommon for a grantee and I to read this and come away reading this paragraph with a sense that, oh, so XYZ was the main issue for the reviewers. And then when my grantee speaks with the program officer says, no, I took really extensive notes, and in my opinion, the main issue for the reviewers was this other issue. And that other issue isn't really coming across loud and clear in the summary statement. So I always encourage people to talk with the program officer. Okay, and then this is provided, this is just the 30-line summary, the public health relevance, and then reviewer 1 or critique 1, and what the individual score was for each of these. So you can see that when somebody's funded, usually these are 1s and 2s. 1 is the best score you can get, 9 is the worst. This is the summary of the discussion according to reviewer 1. And then you walk on through the strengths and weaknesses of all of the scored criteria until you get to the bottom where it's protection of human subjects, et cetera, and whether all of these things were acceptable. And then similarly for, oh, look at that, reviewer 2 gave him a perfect score. So, you know, and from that you can get a sense of how they did. Now, a couple of things here. Sometimes I have grantees ask me, why is my overall score very different than these individually scored criteria? And the answer is that the individually scored criteria are from your 3 assigned reviewers, whereas your overall score is an average of the voting of all members of the study section. That's like 30 people. So the overall impact score may be quite a bit better or quite a bit worse than what each of the individually scored criteria from each reviewer gave you. So I'm going to pause because it looks like I may have a question here. Other than using numerals for citations, what suggestions can you offer to maximize space throughout the different sections of the NIH proposal? So I actually have I'll answer that in a moment, because that's a whole topic in itself. So yeah, so anyway, so what I typically have grantees do is make a comprehensive list of all the critiques that were given to them if they're resubmitting, if they weren't funded, and then put them in a spreadsheet, put your response to them in the spreadsheet, and have your team members do the same. I usually have them put it somewhere like in a Google Doc or something where everybody can share. And then speak with the program officer about it and see if you can come up with some agreement among the whole group, including the program officer, about whether or not the way you're planning to respond is responsive to the summary statements. All right, so let me stop sharing. I'm going to close out this document. Okay, so funny you should ask about about how to get within the page limits, because that is definitely something that I think a lot about, and I have a document on that too. So let me see if I can share my screen again. Okay. So this is something I keep on my desktop for the person who asked this question, believe it or not, to share with grantees for how to get within the page limits. And some of this I also go through for those of you who have access to the 10-week work plan deadline push. I talk about a lot of this there as well. So if you're really desperate for space, you can use left and right margin justified text. It usually saves space. I hate it because the Word is not a very sophisticated program in this respect. So when you justify the text to both the left and the right margins, it looks really nice from about 4 feet away of a nice block style of text, but there's odd spacing between the words that causes a lot of eye strain if you're somebody who reads stacks of submissions every day. I find it impossible to edit in that, but if you're really desperate, it usually does save some space. I also recommend auto hyphenating. So there's a function within Word that allows you, it's in on a Mac platform, it's in the tools. Auto hyphenation is in the tools. So you don't have to manually hyphenate the words. It doesn't bother me in the slightest, but I do know an occasional reviewer who doesn't like, hyphenated words at the end of the line, but it does tend to save space and it is allowed. So changing references we talked about. Make sure that your all of the text in your figures and tables is 9 point. I've seen people squeak by with 8 point. So that's pushing it a little, but I've never seen anybody flagged for using 8 point font. You can eliminate hanging lines of text by tightening the wording. So for example, you probably all know this, but like if you have a paragraph and it ends with a line that only has maybe 2 words in it, just do a little wordsmithing to tighten it up and you'll buy that line of space back. If you have a lot of figures and tables, you can change the layout so that the text, instead of just being wrapped, it's wrapped tightly around the image, and that tends to save a little space. So check your font size throughout the document, because I often find that there are little chunks here and there where it has crept up to 12 point from 11 point. And of course you want 1/2 inch margins all around 11 point font using one of the approved fonts. The other thing, and this one is a big one, I think the default on Word is not single spaced. It's 1.15, so slightly more than single spaced. The sheer number of drafts I get that have the spacing set at 1.15 leads me to believe that that's the default for Word, no matter what your platform is. And it's so close to single space that people don't realize that it's not single spaced. But across a 10,000 word document and over 12 pages, it will save you like 1/3 of a page if you actually reduce it to single space. So go in and check that. I'm a big fan of summarizing key information in figures or text boxes. So for example, if you want to list some of your key eligibility criteria, instead of like exhaustively writing it out in 11 point font, you can just shrink it to 9 point font and put a text box around it and call it a figure. Sometimes, like I was working on an application yesterday with a person was looking at 12 different SNPs, and they just wrote them out exhaustively in a line of text. And instead I listed them, I numbered them and listed them out in a text box, shrunk the size to 9 point, and it saved space and it was easier to refer to. So it was easier, it was a win-win. The other thing you can do is reduce or eliminate white space between sections by either using, like often between paragraphs, I'll only do like 0.2 lines or 0.4 lines. And if you have bolded headers or like colored subheaders or shaded headers or subheaders, you don't need white space. You've got a visual break because you're using bold or white space. Personal preference, this doesn't save space, but I do find it easier to read. If you line your tables and figures up on the right-hand margin, I find that a lot easier. And don't indent your text. I don't indent when there are bullets. I don't indent when I'm starting a paragraph. I line everything up flush against the left margin and use an outline system to help keep clear about which are the headers and the subheaders. So like if it's A significance, B innovation, C approach, then C1 might be the overview, C2 team, C3 preliminary data. And if you want, you can continue that outline system. If C3 is preliminary data, the first study could be C3-1, C3-2. And to make it even more, to make it jump out visually even more, sometimes that outline, C2, C3-1, I'll make that like blue font so that it's really obvious, and then just line everything up on the left margin. Indenting, even with bullets, that auto indent function, you'd be shocked at how much space that wastes. So, anyway, those are some of my, you can see that I think about this stuff a lot. Those are some of the strategies that I use to help with that, with getting within the page limits. Okay, any other questions? So we are just about out of time. So there are two things that I want to remind people of. One is, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing me say this, but once again on the cycle twos, NIH is accepting preliminary data as post-submission material. So you can upload certain types of information to update your application package after your deadline and up until 30 days before your study section meets. And that category of information is called post-submission material. You can only upload once during that window. So I always encourage people to wait until pretty close to that 30-day before the study section meets window. And it's limited to 1 page, whatever you need to say. And historically, what most people use this for is to update the reviewers on publication information. But during the pandemic, NIH has been allowing preliminary data to be uploaded as post-submission material. So they are doing it again for cycle 2. We don't know yet for cycle 3, which would be the deadlines in like September, October, November. They've been waiting really long to tell people, which I find a little frustrating because sometimes it might affect a person's decision-making concerning when they choose to apply. Because sometimes people feel like they won't have enough data to apply, but if they know they have this window of time where they can update the data, maybe they would choose an earlier deadline. But be that as it may, they seem to be letting us know, like next cycle, I would say they'd probably let us know in early September. So anyway, they're accepting that for preliminary data as post-submission material on the cycle 2 deadlines. The other thing is that this is our last week meeting for this cycle. So I want to wish everybody the very best of luck on their upcoming NIH application. I know that some of you have already sent your materials off to your pre-award support office. Some of you are putting your finishing touches on applications, and some of you are still deep in the trenches of writing. I'm right there with you. I've got a lot of July deadlines this year, so I'll be editing throughout the month of June. And our hope is that we will start up again 10 weeks before the October 5th deadline. So that would be, I think it's the last week of July that we would be starting up again. So because you're already registered for Zoom, you'll be automatically registered for the next one. We'll probably have some extra people joining us next time around because we're going to be inviting our writing club members to join us in addition to our library members. So we're hoping for a very lively interaction. And then the last thing that I wanted to say was that this was the first time that we've been running the Ask the Grant Writing Expert format. It's a way that we're trying to give a more personalized service to people who are viewing our courses. And it's been great. People have sent a lot of questions ahead of time. They've asked a lot of questions in the session, which has been really nice. And you'll probably be getting a very brief anonymous survey asking for feedback on the format and what you liked, what you suggest we change, how you're using the format. If there's something we can do that would make it better for you, even in terms of like offering it at a different day and time. We do have people across 4 time zones at this point. So we have to be a little mindful of that, making sure that we pick a time that works for everybody. But yeah, so we thank you all for attending. It's been really great these last 10 weeks. We've had some nice tutorials and guests joining us. And I wish you all the best of luck. And we'll be seeing you again at the end of July. So have a great day, everybody. And thanks for supporting this format. Take care.